Well, this is one of my favorite set pieces of Acts of the Apostles, Paul's speech before their shipwreck. And in a sense, Paul is the coolest head in the room, and he is able to kind of hold them together emotionally before they're running aground. And Paul, in a sense, and what a wonderful juxtaposition between we've been reading in the mornings, we've been reading about Jonah and being, Jonah, testifying to the Lord his God, and basically, you have to throw me over the boat. And Paul, who testifies to the Lord his God and says, don't throw anybody over the boat. We're all going to make it. You're going to lose the ship, but save your lives. In a sense, Jonah is going to have to lose his life in order to save the ship. And in a sense, I suppose that's a great contrast between the old covenant to the new covenant. We have to let go of our boats sometimes and cast ourselves out and trust in God into the raging waters. It can feel that way in life, where we can feel like we're in the midst of a storm and that we've run aground. But ultimately, what's important to God is you. Not your circumstances, not your possessions, not your identities, not your mistakes, not your baggage, not your achievements. None of that is important. That's all shipwreck. That's all flotsam and jetsam, because what God loves and what he sent his son Jesus to save is you. The ways in which you can love others, the ways in which you serve others, the ways in which you have mercy upon others. That's what God desires to save. The you that's inside all of those external things, that is what shall be saved from the storm. And yes, in order to save that you that God has redeemed and remade in the image of his son Jesus, in order to save that you, sometimes he's going to push you aground in order to get the boat. It's almost like in order to get the boat out from around you. It's like cracking a walnut to get to the flesh inside. He's going to sometimes, God cracks open our lives, and we feel that we're shipwrecked. We feel that we're coming apart. But in trusting in God, sometimes we can know that that is God's way of pulling us out in order to save us, even when we run aground. A reading from the Acts of the Apostles. Since much time had been lost and sailing was now dangerous, because even the fast had already gone by, Paul advised them, saying, Sirs, I can see that the voyage will be with danger and much heavy loss, not only of the cargo and the ship, but also of our lives. But the centurion paid more attention to the pilot and to the owner of the ship than to what Paul said. Since the harbor was not suitable for spending the winter, the majority was in favor of putting to sea from there, on the chance that somehow they could reach Phoenix, where they could spend the winter. It was a harbor of Crete, facing southwest and northwest. When a moderate south wind began to blow, they thought they could achieve their purpose. So they weighed anchor and began to sail past Crete close to the shore. But soon a violent wind, called the northeaster, rushed down from Crete. Since the ship was caught and could not be turned head-on into the wind, we gave way to it and were driven. By running under the lee of a small island called Cauda, we were scarcely able to get the ship's boat under control. After hoisting it up, they took measures to undergird the ship. Then, fearing that they would run on the Syrtis, they lowered the sea anchor and so were driven. We were being pounded by the storm so violently that on the next day they began to throw the cargo overboard, and on the third day, with their own hands, they threw the ship's tackle overboard. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and no small tempest raged, all hope of our being saved was at last abandoned. Since they had been without food for a long time, Paul then stood up among them and said, Men, you should have listened to me and not have set sail from Crete, and thereby avoided this damage and loss. I urge you now to keep up your courage, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. For last night there stood by me an angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I worship. And he said, 'Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand for the emperor, and indeed, God has granted safety to all those who are sailing with you. So keep up your courage, men, for I have faith in God that it will be exactly as I have been told. But we will have to run aground on some island.'" The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.